Congratulations, you Looney Tune overachiever. You were right. You didn't need no stinking realtor. You started doing your own due diligence, you were researching, you got online, you found us, you watched this entire video series, and you have arrived at the culmination of your brain surgery, self-empowered home selling journey. The closing. We're going to review quickly what is the expectation, what you can expect to experience during the closing process, and then we'll move on to, believe it or not, 2 more episodes regarding the closing process and what to do after. Because even though it feels like you're done receiving your money, you hit the bank account, sail away into the sunset with all of your millions of dollars, there are still things to consider post-closing. We'll go over those in the next episode. If you have enjoyed the signal and content in these episodes so far, we beg you once again for a like, subscribe, and a share, because we got more content coming, believe it or not, after this series is done. So, as described previously, COVID kind of changed the game. Forever in history, in time, fading into obscurity, buyer and seller met at a closing table, and it was a hairy process. Papers are flying, helter-skelter all over the place. It's almost impossible to track what's going on. Super duper stressful. Lots of different pitfalls. Now, one of the silver lining blessings of COVID is that we've slowed that process down a little bit. We pumped the brakes. Seller meets with their attorney. Buyer meets with their attorney. They do their closings separately, and then documents are couriered, ferried over to the respective attorneys. And the attorneys do the recording with the local municipality to effectuate the sale, consummate the sale, and everybody goes home maybe a little bit less flustered and a little bit more happy. So first, as we described in previous segments, the seller side closing. You've reviewed your closing disclosure with your not realtor but attorney. You've identified mistakes, corrected them. You've signed off on that closing disclosure. You've conducted the final walkthrough with the buyer because you don't have anybody to do it on your behalf. And you're now visiting with your attorney to do your seller side closing. It's going to be about 20 to 30 minutes worth of paperwork, guys. It's exceedingly simple in most cases. Which is why, really, it's a blessing. The sellers don't have to sit there for 5-6 hours sometimes at a traditional closing while the buyers work with the mortgage lender and everybody else involved with a much more involved, detailed process on the buyer side for no reason. You can get out of there pretty quickly with your attorney and wait for the buyer to finish their process. So you're going to bring your smoke certificate and your keys in your garage door fobs and your government-issued ID and all these different things. And you're going to meet with your seller, you're going to sign off on some documentation, and then you're just waiting. Count the hours down until the buyer side closing happens and you receive your funds. The buyer side closing, as described, is much more involved. That's going to happen on the final walkthrough day, the closing day. Final walkthrough transpires. They go to visit their attorney, and they spend quite a bit of time with the bank's attorney, the buyer's attorney, and the title company, signing all the paperwork they need to memorialize their lien and everything else that comes along with it. At that point, the attorneys will fund the loan and work to consummate the transaction. Your seller's attorney has already sent your documents to the buyer's attorney to be rolled into all of the closing documents on that side. The mortgage lender would then fund the transaction, disperse monies to the buyer's attorney. Buyer's attorney would then satisfy any remaining debt on your property by sending the payoff amount to your mortgage lender, whomever that might be, making sure that things are done correctly to finalize that payoff, and then issue your disbursement. That can happen through wire. These days, wire fraud is really ubiquitous. It's a very big problem, and many attorneys have opted out completely of doing money transfers via wire because of it. They've gotten very sophisticated, these scammers, and it's very difficult to get in front of. So check has become bank check, escrow check from the attorney's account, cashier's check, whatever the case may be, has become more prevalent these days. So you may be waiting for a check to arrive in the mail. You can negotiate with the buyer or seller's attorney to overnight it to you if that's your wish. You may have to pay fees for that. You can wait for it to show up in the regular mail, which I do not. I do not really encourage. You definitely want them tracking on that big check of yours, or you can go pick it up. Up to you. If you're around to do that, you can go pick it up. Now, this seems like it would be the final nail in the coffin. You've received your proceeds, but the recording of your sale, the actual memorializing legally of your sale, has to happen before you can expect to really be finished. Typically speaking, the seller's or buyer's attorney isn't going to even issue your proceeds to you until the sale has been recorded with your local authority. But sometimes that does happen, and you need to stay on top of the fact that the sale actually has been recorded, especially if the final walkthrough and the closing, the buyer's closing, is happening on a Friday in the afternoon maybe, and the representing buyer's attorney might not be able to make it in person, because this is how it typically happens. There are e-filing these days. There are electronic recordings in some municipalities, but not all. Either way, you want to make sure that you are not cashing a check for a property you sold that hasn't necessarily been recorded on a Friday, and you're spending money willy-nilly all weekend, kicking your heels up and celebrating, and then something happens over the weekend to that home and the buyer actually doesn't own it yet. It hasn't been recorded, and then we got a problem. Who the heck knows what could happen? So stay on the ball. Make sure that the property's been recorded, the sale has been recorded before you go spending any money. And then also stay on top of distribution of documents. You want to make sure you've got literally every last shred of paper that was signed by anybody involved in this thing, and you want to lock it in your safe. Make sure you have access to it for the rest of the time. Maybe digitize it, I think, is a great idea. Run it through the scanner so you've got it digitally and can send it around to whomever you need to. Tax concerns, whatever the case may be. You don't want this stuff getting out of your sight just because the sale is done. It can be a part of your life for many years to come in the case of tax audits or who the heck knows what. All right? But you knew that because you didn't know Stinkin' Realtor. Like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be back to you with the last 2 episodes in this penultimate segment of our 11-part series about how you don't need no dang realtor to sell your home. See you then. Peace.